panel now, and I'm joined today by former Treasury economist Julian Jessup. We've also got Sam Timms from the New Economics Foundation and an On the Money regular in the studio, Max King, who's a columnist at Money Week. Great to have you all with me. Let's go to you first, Sam. We've been pointing this out for a while, haven't we? Even before the spring statement, it was clear benefits were only going to go up by 3.1% because that was the September inflation number. Were you surprised Rishi Sunak didn't do more in his spring statement?
You're right that we've kind of seen this coming for a while, definitely. I wouldn't say I'm surprised, but kind of realistically, we needed to see a lot more. So it's not a matter of whether or not I'm surprised. It's that morally and economically, the right thing to do would have been to increase benefits by the actual rate of inflation, so kind of the 7-8% rather than the 3.1, and also to have gone further, to have kind of reinstated the £20 uplift and made sure that actually our social security system really works as a safety net for those on the lowest incomes.
Let's go to you, Julian Jessup. In the end, the economy has to pay for everything. It's economic growth, economic expansion. We've seen today, we got some monthly GDP numbers out. GDP, the size of the economy as a whole, in February expanded just by 0.1% compared to January, much slower than was expected. Do you agree with Sam Timms that Rishi Sunak could have afforded to do more to uprate these benefits in line with inflation or not?
Well, I do agree with Sam, actually. First of all, as far as the economy is concerned, I mean, the headline numbers today may have looked a bit disappointing, but they were heavily distorted by swings in the amount that the NHS is spending on test and tracing and on the vaccines. If you look at private sector growth over the last couple of months, it's actually been pretty strong. And indeed, that's been reflected in the public finances over the last few months. The government has actually got in a lot more tax revenue than it anticipated because wages and prices have been higher. So there's plenty of room in the budget to have spent a bit more. Now, to be fair to the government, they did do some things in the spring statement that will help those on lower incomes. But I don't think any of those are really substitutes for increasing benefits in line with inflation. Even if you're not a fan of state welfare, it doesn't make a lot of sense to cut benefits by about 5% in real terms. So I would have been more generous on benefits too, even if that simply meant bringing forward some of the increase that we know will be happening next year based on where inflation is likely to be in the autumn.
Now, Max King, I know you don't take these monthly, month-on-month GDP figures that seriously, do you? Julian said why they may be a bit distorted. But what do you think of the fact that growth is slower according to the official numbers between January and February? And what do you think about this bigger question that could Rishi Sunak have been more generous?
I think monthly data is hugely unreliable, and it's a comparatively recent innovation. We used to do GDP estimates on a quarterly basis.
Every 3 months.
And they kept on being revised for about 5 years. So I think we should not take the 1 month data terribly seriously.
But we know growth is slower than he expected. The Chancellor had penciled in for this year 6% growth. We're not going to be anywhere near that.
Well, we've already seen the inevitable forecasts coming down. So I think that, and I think those are reasonable, but it's too soon to say whether they're right or wrong. I disagree with the panel about the benefits. I think it's always been the fact that state benefits lag inflation. So inflation goes up, the benefits are rated based on the inflation figures 6 months ago, and that's bad news in the short term. But in a couple of years' time, inflation figures will be coming down because higher prices will generate more supply of agricultural products, of fuel, oil. Prices will be coming down. At that point, pensions and other benefits will be uprated significantly, and yet inflation will be much lower. So people who are losing out now will get it all back in a couple of years' time. And what the universal benefits fiasco over the lockdown showed is that it's a great mistake to make temporary changes. Because if you make a change and you tell everyone it's temporary...
Well, they uprated it by £20 and then took that uprate away.
They shouldn't have uprated it by £20 because people always grumble. Don't say thank you when it's going up, and they always grumble when you take it away from them. So it's actually best not to make short-term adjustments, just to let the system run.
Sam Timms, what do you think of that? Look, the benefit system, it's very, very complex. It's absolutely huge. It's tens of millions into the hundreds of billions of pounds. There are often injustices. For instance, people on disability didn't get the £20 uplift in universal credit. But Max King says it will come out in the wash next year. This autumn's inflation number will be very high. Next year, people will get a much bigger benefit rise.
Well, first of all, actually, in the past, we haven't always just based uprating on the previous September. Back in the 70s, when inflation was quite high and very volatile, we actually used a predictive model. So we kind of got ahead of the curve a little bit. To say that kind of this September it will be high, so next year it will all wash out. Realistically, that doesn't help people who are struggling right now. Food banks are struggling more than they ever have before, and people are struggling to feed themselves, to feed their kids, to heat their homes. That is happening right now, and kind of a change in a year's time isn't good enough. The Chancellor can still do more and should do more, and realistically should bring about a change to the benefit system as soon as possible. I do agree that it's best not to make short-term changes to the benefit system, because actually what you need is a system that provides income that is at an adequate level. And what we have right now is inadequate. It's been inadequate for a long time. We've had a decade of cuts to the social security system. And actually, had that not have happened, then people would be much better supported by the safety net than they currently are. And we wouldn't have even needed the uplift necessarily.
Julian, Sam Timms said we should go back to a methodology used in the 70s. You and I were around in the 70s. Didn't we end up going cap in hand to the IMF because the UK was technically bankrupt?
Yeah, well, hopefully the UK economy, and indeed I think the public finances are in better shape than many people think at the moment. I do take the point that you don't want to change the benefit system or any parts of the policy framework too frequently, but this is arguably an exceptional circumstance. I mean, we're facing a massive global shock with the surge, not just in energy prices, but in many other costs, including food as well. So I think it is right for the government to be flexible. And things do look very different from where they looked back in late last year when the decisions on benefits were made. So I think it's perfectly reasonable for the government to be flexible and a bit more supportive. I think the government is right, though, to focus on other things than just benefits. So I think it was good that they have made some tax cuts for low-income earners by increasing the national insurance threshold and by making the taper for universal credit more generous. But I don't think those are substitutes for sticking with the system of benefits that we've got. And I think it doesn't really make an awful lot of sense to be uprating benefits by barely 3% when we know for sure that inflation is going to be 8% or more over the next few months.
Julian Jessop, former Treasury economist. Sam Timms from the New Economic Foundation, thanks a lot for joining me. Max King is going to stay with us.